All right, guys, we are live. We are. It is March. We'll go ahead and get this kicked off. We want to welcome you to the March edition of the Apalachee Inshore Fishing Report. I am Jay Carson. As always, got Evan Snow on the other side of me. And this month we got Capt and Pat McGriff of One More Cast Guide Service based out of Keaton Beach, Florida. So, Pat, we appreciate you coming on.
Appreciate you having me.
Yep, and then this month is our title sponsor is Beach Realty Gulf Coast. If you are looking to buy or sell property in Keaton Beach or the Taylor County area, call or text Michelle Beach, and that number is 850-843-0452. We got Michelle Beach as our title sponsor this month, so we want to thank her for doing that.
Sure. Thanks, Michelle.
Yep, absolutely. So we're just gonna, I guess, jump right into it, huh, Evan?
Yeah. It's I think coming up we're probably, maybe except for a few hiccups, we're going to be full on spring pattern. It looks like coming in. I was out last time Monday, working around going out around some yard work, but it was water temp was 75. I'm sure it has dropped since then with this little bit of cold we're having. And it's I don't know how far it's going to drop. I haven't been out there. What do you think? How fast do you think they're going to rebound off this?
Well,
they
the
probably
water
rebound
temperature
this afternoon, right?
When I was out Sunday, the water was up to 70 degrees. I think it was 69, 70 degrees in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. And so we had another good day of that temperature. And, I've probably dropped 10 degrees with this cool front. So I think it'll rebound pretty quick. I think, by midweek next week, we should be looking at a warming trend anyway. I think... we got this cool front that came through yesterday. We got another one coming through Saturday, I think, which is going to kind of keep those cooler temperatures.
Calling for rain right now, right?
Yeah, Saturday is supposed to be a little wet and nasty, but Sunday looks better. So take that into consideration. We're going to have some cool mornings at the beginning of the week, but I think looking at the long-range forecast, it looks like it's going to start. We're going to start that spring fishing, Pat.
But yeah, and even last week when it was warm and stuff, we were starting to see some spring signs. We were starting to see some bait on the flats and some fish chasing. We caught a few fish on top water out there. Even seeing a few sharks, like they like to come up on the spring and stuff like that, and a little more redfish activity out over the grass for sure. What would you look for, Pat, right now?
Well, my basic trend for this time of year is to get out off the rock areas, bars, rocks, etc. That water's warming every day with the radiant heat. Warm those rocks up, and once they're warmed up, whichever way that water's coming to, that's the side you fish on. Mm-hmm. If the tide starts back out, you pull out from it. You can get in on top of the bars or on the other side or inside and fish it on the incoming. The time of the tide during the day this time of year is crucial.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Definitely as you get those warmer days that when those tides peak and low, definitely play a big part in when you can be successful.
If you get an early afternoon high, you're going to have a better day.
Mm-hmm.
1, 2 o'clock, and then that tide flops back out. Those fish sitting out there feel that warmer water, and they'll energize and feed on that falling tide. Whereas if that tide was high in the morning, you won't have that falling tide.
Correct.
I'm really still right now, all through the winter, but still right now, I'm really loving those afternoon highs for sure. Just get up late and go at lunch or something, and you'll have a lot better success, especially cold mornings like it was this morning. It was probably down in the 40s first thing this morning, but warmed up real nice.
Chilly.
So, why make it tough on yourself? The bite's going to be a little stove up, and it's going to be cold out there on the water. So why not just wait and go a little later?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's kind of the outlook for the next few days. We kind of can anticipate. I'd say what do you think by midweek of March we can kind of start transitioning over to, what you would consider your starting springtime patterns?
Well, I think it's already transitioning, but yeah, I mean, usually by mid-March, we may have a cold hiccup or anything, but it's going to be full on, more towards that late March, April pattern where the fish are out on the flats and not hugging tight in that shallow water and stuff
for
like
sure.
that.
We had that warm-up trend last week, and that really, I felt like it started moving fish around. They were starting to push out. I was, instead of catching them, because I've been fishing kind of more Ecofina Osceola area the last month or so, And I noticed that instead of those fish being up in the creek, they're starting to move out on those outer bars, and then even some on the little oyster flats that are out, near points, some of the outer points and things like that. So they were starting to push out. Now, obviously, we'll get another few days of cold. I think to kind of keep them where they're at, or maybe even push them in just a little bit more. But
Well, for sure, and I think this time of year, even still this time of year, but especially the last few weeks, they're really dependent on the what kind of weather you're having, right now. So when the colder weather, if you get a little cold stretch, they're going to push up in the creeks a little further up in the mouths and stuff, and then as it warms up, they'll kind of spread out and tighten back up. It's just, it's really dependent on your weather you're having right now. Pat, any thoughts on that?
Well, I can recall quite a few years that a friend of mine named Kevin Badgett from Atlanta used to come down. He'd fish unweighted plastic, and he'd throw Zoom flukes, and his son went from like age 8 to 13. I jumped on the boat with him. We had 142 trout and we didn't fish for about 6 hours. That was the 1st of March weekend. He came every year. So that was out in 3, 4, 5 feet of water, depending on the tide, as I recall. And those fish are out there. It's just that everybody's concentrating on the rocks, and people are not giving them the presentation that they want. But there's fish out behind you when you go up there and hit those rocky areas. It's just, it's hard to ignore all those boats that are just jammed up there. Everybody wants to line up and fish the same water.
Yeah.
I found that out, this past weekend. I actually was, a little slow and fell out over those flats a little deeper, and the action picked up for us for sure. So going on to the best bets for this month coming up in March, sponsored by Nowhere Grill. Nowhere Grill on the Beach Road from Perry to Keaton Beach. They've got full bar, all kinds of great food, wings, shrimp balls, the Nowhere Shrimp. They're on little spin on things. They do karaoke on Thursday nights, and they always have live music Friday and Saturday nights. Check them out, Nowhere Grill. So this month's best bet. What do you think?
You start with me?
Yeah,
You
go.
gonna start with me tonight? All right. So best bet.
Let's say area and what are you going to throw? What type of bait? What are you throwing?
As that water temperature warms up, you're going to start to see fish scatter more. They're not going to be quite as concentrated. And of course, I'm gonna be always trying to target redfish because that's just what I really love to do. And so I'm going to start switching over to more search baits like a spoon. So I'm going to say my best bet this month is targeting hard structure, oyster bars, creek mouse. With a gold spoon. And then as that water temperature warms up, especially as it gets towards 70, just start covering water and covering those areas, and you're going to find you some redfish. And that would be my best bet for March.
You got a best bet, Captain, coming up next few weeks?
My best bet, my best bet will be to concentrate in about 3.5 to 4 feet of water, mid to first half of the tide incoming, and then fish the 2 foot becoming 3. I'll throw plugs and unweighted plastic, a little bit of cork and plastic maybe. Probably throw plugs more than anything, biter baits and maybe a couple other suspending lures, some Smithwick Rogues.
Would you say that March is a good plug month?
Absolutely. Some of the biggest fish that we've caught over the years on plugs have been in March and early April.
Yes.
These fish are pre-spawn, and the larger outsized fish are going to start feeding earlier as the shrimp show up. The other key we hadn't really mentioned is once you see shrimp in the stomachs of the fish that you take, then you'll know it's on.
Yeah.
And that's generally when we hold 65 degrees overnight. You get up in the morning and it's 65 and it's 75 plus.
So in other words, your starting temperature in the morning, if you launch at daylight and that water temperature is 65 degrees.
65, it's on.
Yeah.
That's what I call holding 65.
Yeah, there's already been some big trout caught. Like we've hung a couple big ones. We've boated one, and I've been hearing reports of some really large, which you would consider
actually,
gator trout for our area.
Last weekend there was a lot of big trout caught last weekend, especially Saturday. We had a good day Saturday. We had a good day Sunday too. Catching a lot of fish over 20 inches. So we didn't catch any giants over the past weekend. I think the biggest we caught was like 24.
We caught one also.
But you caught a real big one last weekend, right?
A little over 27 inches. Yeah,
That's
I didn't
a good
weigh
fish.
it,
That's
but
a
it
nice
was,
fish.
and he was fat too. It wasn't a snake. It wasn't stretched out.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things that you can be excited about. I think is March is just the opportunity to run into one of those truly big fish.
That, and I'm going to start throwing some top water stick baits too, which I did the other day a little bit and got a little action on. But so that would be leading me into
Your
guess
best bet.
my best
yeah,
bet.
your best bet.
So here's what I love to do. I love to get out on a grass flat, and it can be low tide or high tide, just wherever you're seeing a fish, and the mullet will really start showing up and schooling on the flats, and you'll see them jumping or backing out of the water or something. This is more mid to late March, but it could happen now. I'm starting to see some mullet show up, and I like to throw a Rapala skitter walk or a spook or whatever your top water bait of choice is in there, and a lot of times there'll be some big redfish following.
I was just gonna say one of the things that we can look forward to in March too is that's when some of our biggest redfish show up for the year. Usually in March and April, we get some pretty big fish.
You might get some bite or some slow interaction right now if you went out tomorrow afternoon and threw some top water with the warm temps, but really starting in a couple weeks, that's going to be really starting to fire off, and I'll just throw it all day long. I mean, I love it. Pat was just saying that he don't care about it.
No, I said my arm won't throw it all day. I didn't say I didn't want to do it. I said
you pick and choose.
I wasn't going to do that all day.
Yeah, you pick and choose your times, right, Pat?
Yeah, I'm looking for surface activity, and then I'm going to say, how about mine? And 6 casts later, I put it down, pick up something else.
Well, now, since we're talking about top water, Captain Pat, what is your go-to top water lure? Like if you're targeting big trout or redfish,
stick
do you stick bait? Like, what's your favorite one for redfish? What's your favorite one for big trout? Or is it the same?
Well, you can't get the one that I like. I have my all-time favorite for both fish.
Devil
is a Super Spook Junior, and it's gold, and it's not the golden sardine, although that's a good second best. It was a gold chrome, and Bass Pro Shops carried it, and it had a light, thin, half a pencil width orange on the bottom, but it was black back gold, and I've caught more big fish on it than anything. But my go-to redfish is the Blecho, BLCHO in the she-dog. That's a blue back, chartreuse side, orange belly.
So is that the color? The Blecho is the color?
That's what I call it.
Okay,
Blecho.
okay.
BLCHO.
And that's a mirror lure.
I call it that.
The she-dog?
The she-dog,
She-dog.
yeah. The she-dog is a higher pitch, rattle sound different than the
and that's
that everybody
for
likes.
louder, rougher
That's for reds.
conditions.
Reds just eat it up. They think it's a crab, and they eat it up.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my go-to stick bait.
There we go.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about, as we get March and April, we can really start to, pull out the big topwater plugs and start to, as those fish get more active, they're going to start feeding on the surface. Actually, when I was out this past weekend, I was seeing some surface feeding. So, I mean, that was a good sign. We weren't targeting, we weren't targeting them on the surface, but I was seeing some surface feeding going on.
We targeted them some, and we got some interaction. It was lazy interaction, and I caught a few, slot trout, but they were still coming up and popping at it and following, rolling on it, and stuff like that.
Just real quick as we move forward, guys, we're about to transition into Pat's going to start talking about some tackle that he brought. But before we get into that, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and start sending them in now. If you got a question for Pat, I mean, you only get Pat, ask him a few questions every now and again. So you got an opportunity, you got to take advantage of it.
Because you got to catch him now, because you ain't going to catch him on the canal. He's going to look down and keep riding.
That's right. So if you got any questions for him or for us, feel free to ask us. Throw them up there. We'll get to those questions here towards the end. But we want to make sure that you can have an opportunity to do that. And so sending those questions in. Anything about March, if you're coming down, you want to know what your best baits are or whatever that you're trying to target, send those questions in and we'll get to them.
One more thing I want to say while we're talking about targeting flats and lures and stuff. A lot of times in March, especially your warmer mornings when in a couple weeks or so, of course your cotton cordell, rattle, and redfin, and people fish with those all winter long. But they do really well when if you got the capabilities to get in there, and if you get in there in a foot, 18 inches, 2 feet of water, where it's too shallow to even throw much other than a weightless or a top water or something like that. If you can just work those slow and just dip them under the water, I get a lot of action on those.
Especially from trout. Yeah,
and on low tide. Really is all I like to do.
And the reason you're using that is just because on low tide there's not as much water between the grass and the surface, and so you're just trying to keep that bait.
Yeah, I'm just
in that
barely
little
just-
in that little section of water that it's not getting hung up in the grass, but it's also getting down there where the
Yeah, you can't throw much else other than top
Right.
water or something weedless
Right.
or something, and you can't work it hard because it's going to get hung up in the grass. You got to just barely just kind of just tick it through there. You know?
How deep of water are you talking about being in?
Like less than 2 feet, as shallow as your boat would get to like 2 feet of water. I know you don't
As
go.
shallow as your boat would get, and as shallow as your boat would get was different than
And the shallow, I think we got 3 different levels here.
we got 3. That's why I said how much water's over the grass.
Right.
Or the bottom.
Water over the grass, like I'd say a foot or less
Okay.
than a foot.
Now
yeah.
you're telling people what. Now you're telling people what they can do.
Yeah, and obviously that's not the total.
and
depth, but-
and I will say, as you know, as you guys know, I spend a lot of time pushing around looking for redfish, and I'm in there shallow. And you'd be surprised, especially this time of year, how often I see big trout laid up in that real shallow water. Even on low tide, they're sitting in
Potholes.
there in the potholes or
And
any
how,
depression.
How often can you catch them?
It's hard to catch them. It's hard to catch them in there, but I see them, so I know where they're at. But usually when that water comes in, they're a little bit more relaxed, and that's when you can go back in there and try to catch those big trout.
And also,
it's hard to catch those big trout.
I
in
know,
that shallow
Jay,
water.
you've probably seen this too in there, pulling those shallow flats and especially in the potholes. But there's been tons of sheephead on the flats here lately.
There has been a bunch,
And
yeah.
anybody can chime in if you've been seeing some big ones too.
But I haven't heard that they're out there on the reef yet. So
I think they're probably starting to show up. I don't know. Somebody might get mad if I talk about that too much, but yeah, if you know. Yeah,
some areas to go, yeah.
around the moons,
yeah.
they'll spawn.
It
And,
should
and
be-
they can be caught.
It should be getting going here this month.
I don't want to get. I'm not going to get too specific on that. I might get death threats. So in some deeper water. But I don't know. It'd be hard to target. I don't really catch them on the flats like that. It'd have to be hard to target.
You see them a lot. I know some people. You can try to, if you got a shrimp or something like that, and if you're trying to sight fish them, which not many people around here sight fish sheephead. That's kind of a Louisiana thing, but there is an opportunity to do so if that's something that you're interested
if you
in.
want to, it's something I haven't tried, but I'm pretty sure.
Little
it would
shrimp or
work.
something,
You're
yeah.
looking and we're drifting these flats and we're seeing them stack up on these little broken bottom potholes. They'll just be stacked in them. So if you start seeing that and you're drifting and you got your polarized sunglasses on, you can see one of those coming. Maybe pitch a shrimp and just let it sit out there for a second before you get to it.
Yep.
I mean that would be probably how to target them on the flats, but definitely in creek holes with some structure around bends and where it gets deep and you got a little rock or oysters on the bottom, you can definitely throw a fiddler crab or a piece of shrimp out there and catch them around the moons and like we said, a little offshore.
So, all right, yeah, you want to transition over into the tackle tip?
Yeah, the tackle
I'll let
tip.
you take over, and I'm gonna go get us readjust the camera.
It's all yours, Pat.
You ready to go?
Okay. Lanny Baker, average water temp. It's been rising until the last couple of days. Like I said, it peaked out about 75, but high 60s, low 70s for about the past week, something like that last weekend. Yeah, that looks good, Jay.
Well, y'all asked me to do some tackle tips. Most people fish the 5-inch baits basically one way, and they fish it like they'd fish a worm back home in the pond. They use an offset hook and bring it down and out of the slot, which is pretty basic. Most people know this part right here. And then when they go to lay it into the bait, they put it like they were worm fishing in a pond or in the lake and skin pinch it. I don't do that. And I don't do that for several reasons. One, I'm not fishing blowdowns or rock piles or riprap. I'm basically fishing open water with a grass base or possibly some rock or whatever. So what I do is lay this bait in and put the bait right in the middle of the bend of the hook, pinch it, bring it back, and bring the hook out directly in that same spot, so that when I finish, you've got the hook hanging, the bait's hanging right there in the middle of the hook. This allows the hook to be out, but not sticking out so much that it hangs up. Now you can use this bait. We talked about our favorite baits. You should always have one of these tied on if you're throwing a top water bait or a hard jerk bait. I call it a follow-up bait. I used to bass fish hundreds of thousands of hours, and we always kept chartreuse culprit worm to follow our spinnerbait and a spinnerbait to follow our buzzbait this time of year. Well, if one man or one angler, is in the front with a topwater stick bait and the man or angler in the middle is fishing with a lip bait and the person in the back's holding this, you'll catch just about every fish that strikes. When you miss a fish on a stick bait, the reason you miss him is when he strikes the bait doesn't do what it should do. What should it do? What should the bait do when he strikes it? If it was a fish, what would it do, Evan?
It should give. I mean,
no. If a trout strikes a little bait fish on the surface, what would it do? If he hit it,
it's going to flutter.
It would sink. It would sink, boys. And your topwater stick bait won't sink. You throw this out and it sinks, and he says, "There it is." He's looking for it to sink because every other little fish that he struck on the surface sank. So that's why this is a very effective bait. Now, the other ways to hook this, you can skin pinch it, and then, of course, you can chin hook it, just bring it up and chin hook it and expose it. But when you chin hook it, it's more likely to turn and lay over on the bottom and hang up. So this is more weedless over rocks, or more actually non-hookup over rocks, as well as it is over the grass. This is my go-to on the 5-inch this time of year.
And with that hook sticking out like that, you miss less fish.
Yes. Yeah. When you get a strike, when you feel the tap, what most people do wrong with this rig here is they set the hook like they were bass fishing. You don't do that. You reel into the fish and set the hook on and just come up on the heavy. You're going to land probably 3 or 4 to 1 with the hook exposed over fishing with it skin pinched, like you were bass fishing.
Now, as far as hookup ratio, when you're talking about doing it like what you're talking about as opposed to chin hooking, do you think the hookup ratio matters? I mean, it changes much at all?
No.
I don't think so.
It's just a little harder to teach in my boat. It's a little harder to teach the chin hooking because you're having to teach them to pick it up and then lead it so it doesn't drop, just nose down.
You get more. It's more of a rhythm thing.
This bait's going to drop back down on its own parachute. The V itself, it's going to drop down on its own flat and slide down and look more like a shrimp. It's a little easier to teach this method. That's why I do it this way. But yeah, you certainly can catch fish if you're using a 7 or a 6 or 7-inch plastic soft jerk bait. Chin hooking is the way to go because of that bigger bait. I was also going to show people what I prefer is a screw lock style jig head. Now there's multiple reasons for it, but the main reason is you use less plastic. If you're throwing a cork and grub or bouncing a grub, the pinfish are all constantly pulling at that bait. And the reason some people don't like the assassin or other soft plastic baits that are still made of plastic is they tear and they use them up faster. Well, when you use the screw lock feature jig head, you save your baits. A pack of assassin baits here is 8 baits, retails around $5. That's 40 cents a bait. Yeah. If you're throwing a gotcha jig head or a hurricane jig head from Walmart, you're basically catching 1 fish per piece of plastic. Well, as soon as you put a screw lock jig head on there, you're going to up that to 3, 4, 5, 6 fish a bait, and that's going to save you money. Rather than a 30-cent jig head, you buy a $1.30 jig head, and you save $20, $30 a day on plastic. So I like to show people quickly how to put it on there. Most people don't understand the screw lock feature. When you lay the bait, and I'm going to stick it toward the camera, you lay the bait on there and see where it's going to come out. Well, you can't remember that exact spot, so take the hook and prick the plastic and make a mark right there. Now, when you go down in the plastic, come out at the mark where you made the tear on the plastic. And then when you get against the screw lock feature, push it snug, stop, and bring the tail towards you through the hook. 1, 2, 3 times around the hook, and the bait is on the jig head. When you want to take it off, don't tear it off and waste it. Go back away from you. 1, 2, 3 turns away, and the bait is off the screw lock feature. You throw it down in the boat. George, your buddy, starts catching fish on it. You turn around, pick it back up. You can use it again. Or you can use the other side. That will save you a lot of money. It'll also catch you more fish because you're not going to have fish bunch the plastic up and block the hook. The plastic is not going to get and block up on the hook.
Yeah, that's one of the things about those jigs. I use them too, and they hold that plastic in place so much better than most other, types. With that screw on there, it
Absolutely.
really keeps that soft plastic in place. And then when you got stuff, you got a short strike or pinfish or whatever, that hit that, you're not gonna, it's not gonna pull what I call pull your pants down. It's not gonna pull your pants down.
And here's something while we're talking, and I hope I'm not cutting you off here, Cap, but those saltwater assassin, the sea shads, the ones that you were just showing,
Right?
do you need the paddle tail to catch fish on it? Just a quick question.
No. If you rig it the way I do upside down, and I always do this so that the tail won't attract the pinfish. If you pull it the way they intend for you to, and set it up this way, you're going to lose that tail immediately. Once you lose that tail, the water's going to come up and roll that bait. If you turn the bait over and have the tail this way and invert it, when you come out of the belly there, then when you lose the tail, and I'm going to re-rig it quickly so that I can show you what I'm talking about. Once you have the bait rigged, if he takes the tail off, you still have a straight edge stabilizer, and that bait will continue to fish. Now that's whether it's on a cork or whether you're just casting it and bouncing it.
Because so many people, and on my boat, and I know your boat and everybody's boat, when you're fishing those paddle tail style baits like that, as soon as the tail's gone, they
start crying, Captain, I lost the tail. I lost my tail. Oh, yeah. My boat, too. What I like to do is take that one particularly, or take one and throw it out there and catch the biggest trout or a nice trout on it and say, did I need a tail on it that time, George? No.
Well, I usually let them keep throwing it just to prove a point, but yeah.
Well,
They're not biting the tail.
The pinfish don't hit this bait when it's rigged upside down as much because that tail, the frequency is about a third as fast as it comes through the water if you're bringing it the way that manufacturer wants you to fish it.
All right.
Very
Appreciate
good.
that tackle tip. That was very informative. There.
Absolutely.
Jay, you have anything you want to go through before we start jumping into some? We're going to readjust the camera here. Okay. Guys, go ahead and start dropping some questions if you got any. I know Pat loves answering questions, so we're just going to let him have it, really.
They may not want to ask me any questions.
But, we just want to thank Beach Realty Gulf Coast one more time for sponsoring the program. Michelle Beach, she's from the area. Well, she's maybe not from there, but she's lived there 20 plus years. If you're familiar with the Keaton Beach area and the old marina, her family owned that for a long while, 15 years or so. And, she knows the people, she knows the property, she knows the values, she knows, the area. So she'd be a great person to call and get a hold of and, show you around. And she lives right there at the beach. She lives a few houses down from me. And she's actually selling the house next door to me. So if you want to come be my neighbor, give her a call and you can come be neighbors with me. But again, we want to appreciate her sponsoring it. And let me get a number. It is 850-843-0452.
While we're waiting on some questions to come in, I just, we've had a lot of rain here in the last month.
Absolutely.
And there's a varying water clarity as you go from south of Keaton Beach to north.
Right.
And where I've been fishing up there around Ecofina River and Osceola, I will say this, the water has gotten darker, more tannic, but I don't know that it's slowed down the fishing too much for me here in the last month. Have you guys noticed any slowdown really as far as the fishing goes with all the fresh water?
I love tannic water.
Well, I know the tannic's good, but I'm just talking about, sometimes when we get a big rain, it can slow it down. But I was surprised to see that the amount of rain that we've got hasn't really affected it too much.
I think around the big river mouths, it can push them out and affect them.
Sure.
But, if you're not right there on the river, Pat, I'm going to let you have it because I know you got a wealth of knowledge on this.
Well, the fish we're fishing for is an ambush predator. The darker the water is, the more big fish will move. The more big fish will ambush because that same fish that you talked about not getting to bite, the reason you couldn't get him to bite
clear
is
water,
because,
yeah, I can
because
see
you
him.
could see him.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you couldn't have seen him, you could have caught him. But because you could see him, you couldn't.
Yeah.
He's not going to move if he thinks he's vulnerable. So, yeah, some of the best trips I've had have been in 15-plus knot winds when the water was so dirty you couldn't see a foot on the surface. Yet those trout, they could the bigger trout, their senses are refined and they can still find your baits.
Yeah.
Jay's just salty about the dark water because he likes looking at the fish before he casts.
That's
Yeah,
right.
well,
he doesn't
yeah.
want he doesn't want us to have our color.
Hey, as long as the fish are biting, I don't care, man. As long as they're chewing, and it's been a good 2 months here. The last 2 months has been really good. I hope it only gets better from here as we move into spring.
One thing I would say about color, though, if you're in dark water, use common sense. Don't throw the pretty fanciful translucent baits with a lot of glitter in them. The light's not going to penetrate in the water and reflect those colors. Use your solid colors, chartreuse, pink, yellow, whites. Use your solid colors in that darker water until you find a bite, and then refine your color. But hunt with your solid colors in that dark water.
And that's white, pink, yellow, orange, candy corn,
chartreuse and orange, yeah.
chartreuse, yeah.
All right, we got some good questions in. Before we get to them, you guys keep the questions. We're going to get to them, I promise. But I wanted to pose this question to you. So, Pat, when you're going out scouting and you're trying to find the fish that you're going to take your clients to, are you fishing those? Are you going to fish those fish the same way that you would with your clients, or are you doing something a little different to find those fish than what you would do?
Well, as
with
they
your
say
clients?
on NPR, that's a great question. I take a Cajun Thunder and rig a length of leader exactly the same as my client's going to have a pinfish. Now, I put plastic down there, and I'm fishing the same depth of presentation that we're going to fish tomorrow, but I'm going to catch them on the plastic because I know how to make the plastic look or trick them
Sure.
with it. But that's basically what I do, and I'm going to already have a pretty good idea of what colors I'm going to use. I'm not going to play with a lot of color. Once I get a bite, then I'm going to stay with that color if I'm catching the keepers, and I'm going to make a rule of, I'm going to make so many casts and move the boat. So many casts and move the boat, and see if my pattern of depth or tide is repeatable, if my pattern is repeatable as I go down the coast. If it is, and I know I can go in with live bait and produce those fish and probably some bigger fish.
Right.
That's
Okay.
generally my practice.
And we
pattern.
were talking about the other question that I thought of a minute ago too was, now we were talking about water clarity. Obviously, darkness in water isn't that big of a deal. But if you ever see like particulate matter, like heavy particulate
Right.
matter in the water, does that affect where you're gonna fish?
Absolutely. If you have a trout's like, let's start. It's pouring down rain. If you walk to the mailbox and walk back, or you run and you run back, which way do you get wetter?
I guess it's about, you're out there less time if you're running, so
That's the theory, but you're running into more water because you're running fast, and you get wetter. The trout's not going to move where that silt is going to get in their lungs, their gills, and clog them up. They might survive in that water, but they're not going to move, and they're not going to move fast. They're not going to move fast enough to attack a bait, and their perception is they have to attack your bait.
right.
So you gotta get out of that silt. If you've got rolling trash or debris
Sure,
in the water,
sure.
you got to move out of that and get into what I call the curtain areas where the water's changing from that too dirty to clear.
Right.
And then you'll have a great ambush point in that curtain.
A lot of times you'll see a tide line or a current line where there'll be a transition zone from that dirty water to that clear water. Is that an area that you're going to target, or are you going to try to push into that clear water a little bit more?
Most of the time, it's not you may not recognize it until you've moved 100 yards or so. If it's a straight solid line, it's gonna freak trout out. They're not gonna respond to it. They got to have had that water change be gradual so they can find the area that they're comfortable in.
Sure, Evan.
And then it will be a very refined line.
Right, and then you'll start running into more fish.
Right.
Yeah. You were going to say something, Evan?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
It can be 100 yards away. It's just wherever the water's clear.
Well, when I noticed something when I was out the other day is, and I was in an area that had a freshwater creek coming out relatively close, and I was south of Keaton Beach, and I was in some really clear water, and then I went over. You could see a distinct clear tannic line where the tannic water was hitting that clear water. And so that was the only reason. That was my thought as to asking that question, is because I saw that distinct line from the tannic to the clear. And I was just curious if maybe that was an area that maybe you'd spend some time.
Yeah, I've not talking about silt. We're getting away from talking about
Yeah.
silt here, but from tannic clear,
Yeah.
I've fished right there. Be fishing in clear water, and as soon as I hit tannic, start fishing there and catch fish.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I said, I don't think the trout know if it's 100 yards away.
No. I was just. There's obviously a current
usually
line or
though
tide line or there's something there.
Usually it's not a defined line unless
Sure.
we've had a storm. Now,
Yeah.
I've seen it
But
where
there could be. Yeah.
I've seen it where the water was you couldn't have 6 inches of visibility, and then you have 6 feet right
Yeah.
there, and it would literally look like the wall
Sure.
was poured there.
Right.
But that's what I said about that freaks them out.
Yeah. Well, and I've gotten some questions about water clarity over the last few days, and like I was saying earlier, it's pretty clear. It's its usual clear south of Keaton. The more closer you get to the Steenhatchee River, it starts to darken up and get a little more tannic. But then obviously as you go north, Evan, where would you say that kind of line is where it starts to really get tannic? You've been in that area a little bit more than I have here lately.
North of Keaton.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't fish there
It
very
usually
much.
breaks the first time around Yates Creek. And
I haven't been fishing up there.
your
Sorry
second
about
break of color will be around Spring Warrior, and then your third one will be about between Eagle's Nest and Finn Holloway.
Yeah. Yeah, where that Finn Holloway.
Yeah, they're
starts.
trying to give away spots, Jay.
Well, not specific spots.
But
Not
yeah,
specific spots.
Yates Creek. Yates Creek is a lot of times will be clear, and then you go up,
Yeah.
not far past it, and it'll be tannic.
Gets darker up that way. All right, so we got some questions coming in. Some of them you already answered Lanny's question, right? Lanny Baker, with the water temperature been this week?
Yeah, he don't fish but 2 spots anyway, so I don't know why he's asking that.
Lanny, your secret creek is it's probably right now it's probably about 65, 64, 63 degrees, somewhere in that range.
His secret creek.
So, and then I'll probably cool off a little bit this weekend, and then it should warm right back up, I think, next week. Another question is by Chew Strong. What is the right water temperature to target flounder on the beaches? Now, obviously, we don't fish beaches too much, but we can talk a little bit about flounder, right?
I think Pat's got this one. He knows all about flounder.
Well, beaches are a long ways away
from us.
Yeah, years ago I had some clients and it blew us out, and they said, well, where's the nearest bridge we can fish off of? And I looked at him and I looked at his partner and I said, St. George Island.
Well, he's probably referring to like a Wakulla Beach area or something over there. Maybe Alligator Point or something. Yeah.
The flounder this time of year are generally coming back in off of the spawn. They'll spawn anywhere from 20 feet out to 60, depending on the water temperature being right. And so you can't really predict them. The troughs are where our flounder are now, more so probably because of the availability of food in those troughs. It may be water temperature. We can't ask a flounder to find out, but they'll not go up into the edges until the bait shows up and the shrimp shows up in that shallow, less than a foot of water. So the food's got to be there. My answer to my question would be, I'd say 75 degrees, and your flounder on the beach would be on.
Yeah. Well, I will say this, and Evan, you can maybe back me up here, but in the last week, I've started catching more flounder than I had been previously. So we've caught, and a little bit bigger size too. Over the winter, I was catching some pretty small, non-legal fish. And then here in the last week, we started catching some legal flounder. So
I haven't caught a flounder in a long time.
Okay.
No, you got to fish on bottom for that. No, we've been throwing suspenders mostly. So
I got you. All right. So, but there are some flounders starting to move in, and they should move in through March and into April. So you can start to see those. And when you're out there on the flats,
March, April's good flounder.
yeah. And when you're drifting over a flat and you see a pothole coming up in front of you, pitch a little bait in that pothole because there's a good chance that there might be a flounder.
Or a trout or a redfish.
Yeah.
There he is talking about potholes again.
So, yeah. Our next question is from same person, Chew Strong. Appreciate the questions coming in. We got several more to get to, but Favorite suspending lure for trout?
You go first.
I like, personally, my go-to would, I don't know if it's considered a suspending lure, but yeah, what you were just talking about. Probably in that color too, honestly.
I'm guessing he's talking hard bait. Give me a hard bait.
Suspending hard bait. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to catch numbers, big fish? If you're catching big fish, probably catch 2,000. If you're going for numbers, maybe a Miradine or possibly like one of those Rapala,
Subwalks?
ripstop or a subwalk
Yeah.
or something like that.
I think the Catch 2000, the Catch Junior, and the Catch 5 are better this time of year, and the Miradines are better in the fall when it cools off. And so I would go with Catch or Catch Junior.
A particular color?
Yes.
Which one? All of them? All of them?
CHPR and the number 11, the redhead, white redhead.
I got you, the classic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, in the clear water.
Yeah,
As soon as the
yeah.
water gets color in it, I'd go to the CHPR.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's a little tip, and I'll go ahead and throw this out there for free. I've heard of some being caught, and we have hung to probably 6+ pound trout in the last week on a 808 Miradine catch. Miralure catch 2000.
There you go. All right, next question is from Robert Little. I don't know, and this is not really a question; it's a comment, but we can kind of maybe talk about it a little bit. He says he had a good day fishing for trout in about 3 to 3.5 feet, and then the following day we finally found them out in 5 feet of water. The weather and water temps were about the same. I'm guessing he's asking, was there any reason?
Yeah, I got
that?
I got a question. When you were catching them in 3 feet of water, was it low tide? And when you were catching them in 5
That's a
feet of
good
water,
question,
was it
yeah.
high tide?
Yeah.
And I've got a question. Which direction was the wind blowing?
So you think that makes a difference too?
And that would, your reasoning behind that is what? So for everybody.
Because if you had warmer water ashore and the wind shifted from the shore, it would push that warmer water out. And the fish that were turned on in shallow water would now be out there in 5 feet of water because of the warmth added.
What you got? Next question.
All right, not question. Somebody said they had a great. Matthew Lamendola said they had a great day fishing today.
That doesn't surprise me. It was a nice
Limited
warm
out
afternoon.
on big trout. So yeah, I'm imagining he was fishing
Well, what's
this
his
afternoon.
favorite? What's his favorite
Right,
suspended
right,
lure?
exactly, yeah.
You limit it out on big
Yeah,
trout.
yeah.
Is that so? You caught 1 over 19?
No answer.
No answer.
I don't think we're gonna get instant answers.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
yeah. Rest of them are just kind of comments here. So
We really don't have any questions.
no, not too many more that I see. So which is
I saw one guy who likes the she-dog said he catches a lot of fish. It's real loud. Absolutely.
yeah, that was Chew Strong again earlier. It wasn't really a question, but he said she dogs at great.
I got one
Great.
you missed here. We got Jason Johnson Sr.
Oh yeah.
I'm assuming he says, what is the best presentation lure for reds, and what water? Question mark. Never had much luck on reds.
Can I take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Have at it.
A quarter or a half ounce gold spoon. You can cover water. It's hard to lose it's hard to lose it no matter how deep or shallow you throw it. But generally, I'd say from about 1 to 3 feet of water, with 2 being the magic number on my boat. If you're reading 2 point something, throw a gold spoon and learn how to fish it. You want to learn how to fish it? Hold your rod at 10 o'clock, turn the handle. If you don't bump and bow, 10-inch bow. 1, 2, 3, I'm up, and 1, 2, 3, I'm down. That's a 10-inch bow on the rod tip. When you bump the bottom, if you're not bumping the bottom, you're not fishing for reds. The spoon represents a crab. It does not represent a fish. Come see me someday. I'll explain that to you, or go fishing with me. Get you a red, or the option is a jig spinner. But a gold spoon, copper spoon, those two, I can catch reds every day with it. I can teach my people in less than 15 minutes how to catch a fish if they're present. It works in the creeks. It works in the open grass. It works over the rocks. It's pretty
Yes,
much
yeah, it's
it's
very
pretty
versatile.
much-
Probably for a redfish lure, if you just had to pick one lure
To throw the rest
to
of your
throw
life.
the rest of your life to catch redfish, it'd probably be a gold
Gold
spoon,
spoon.
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
It's tried and true. And
it is.
if we're waiting, if someone wants to drop a question in, we'll get to it. If not, we'll probably sign off. I think we're at about 45-minute mark
Yeah.
right here, so that's plenty of time. But I will say, for the last couple months we haven't caught much using popping corks. I don't use a whole lot of popping corks in the wintertime, but they've been firing back off here about the last week or so on the popping corks. I've noticed. I was getting spanked by a boat over there, and we were throwing some different stuff. And I looked over and I see them cork slinging. We threw a cork out there, and sure enough, bam.
Were you using shrimp or artificials under it? Shrimp.
We had some on the boat, and I put a shrimp under there. And it's not out fishing artificials completely yet, but in whatever point that tide was on and whatever they were fired up on, it did for an hour or two, and then they kind of fell back off. But I hadn't caught anything on a cork for, a couple months hardly, other than just like letting it tide drift in during the wintertime in the creek or something, and just let it tote a shrimp down there with the current or something. Let's see.
All right. Yeah, so I guess that's going to about wraps us up. Real quick here, we got a couple more comments. Lanny Baker said he appreciated the tip on the spoon. Never had much luck with a spoon, so now he knows why. So any last minute questions? Any last minute comments you guys want to add before we sign off?
You got anything you want to talk about, Pat?
Just, the Green Moon Assassin, you've been catching fish on it. I had a lot of good people talking about it. Green Moon in the 5 inch has been catching fish. The Pink Ghost and the Bubblegum Pink, I don't know what Assassin calls it pink. I think it's just pink. Those have been hot colors in Steenhatchee and in Keaton.
The Osceola River as well. I caught a bunch of fish on those Green Moon in the Osceola River around creeks and just in there too.
Right.
I mean, probably all over.
Yeah, I one of the great things about March, and I'll just say this real quick before we go, and even in April, is you can fish in a variety of different ways and still be successful because the fish they're still kind of staging in a lot of areas. So you can fish in close and find fish, and you can fish out in the flats and find fish. And
They hungry, man. They hungry.
And they're ready to eat. They hadn't, they've been through some cold water through the wintertime, and they're ready to put that feed bag on and eat. So
Absolutely.
And they'll start chasing baits too. You got to hit them in the nose with it.
Yeah, that's the truth. So, well, Pat, we really appreciate you coming on again.
I appreciate the opportunity.
We'll try to have you on again in the future here as we keep moving on.
Oh yeah, Pat'll be a regular. We'll have him on 2 or 3 times a year at least.
And
appreciate that.
Yep, definitely. So we appreciate that, and we want to thank our sponsor again for this month, Beach Realty. So make sure we want to thank them, Michelle Beach over at Beach Realty.
Nowhere Grill as
Nowhere
well.
Grill.
Y'all got to if you're going down to Keaton Beach and you hadn't stopped and tried it, just stop and try.
And
it.
they usually have a nightly special, like on Wednesdays. I think that's all you can eat wings for like $12.99. So if you get up there on Wednesday nights, you can have all you can eat wings and
great wings.
They got some other great specials going on.
Try the shrimp balls if you go there.
Right, and then make sure you follow them on Facebook. They have a Facebook page where they post all their daily specials on. So make sure you follow Nowhere Grill on Facebook, and you'll get keep up with what's going on there.
Real quick on the Green Moon, not beneath the popping cork, just weightless, kind of just what Pat was showing you earlier.
So, yep. And if anybody is interested in reaching out and being a sponsor of a segment or a show, please get in touch with me and Evan. We would love to work with you and get be able to I guess help you out with advertisements. So.
Yeah, because there ain't nobody except fishermen watching this show.
Right. So if you get a chance or if you think about it, reach out to me and Evan. We'll get that set up. Well, Pat, thanks again, Evan. We're going to wrap it up. So, guys, until next month, I'm Jay Carson, Evan Snow, Capt. Pat McGriff. We'll see you in April.